Today I was reminded of something that I did a long while back. It was the end of a relationship that I was in while I was living in Long Beach. It was particularly painful, and I was left feeling like I was in shambles afterwards. This is probably pretty atypical of getting dumped, I would imagine, right? I was trying to do my best to redistribute whatever I was feeling into something that could be positive of use, which would become art a lot of times. And I would often go out to the front porch of the place that I was living in at the time. Some of my friends affectionately referred to it as a tree house because it did kind of look like a tree house. But I used to sit on the balcony and I would write. And on one particular occasion, I was outside writing on my iPad, and a bee began to buzz around my head, just rotating around my head, increasing in speed and increasingly irritating me the longer that it would do this. And I could feel myself slowly boiling over, and I was completely unaware of what this bee had, of why it would even have any interest in me whatsoever, and why it felt compelled to buzz around my head in such a maddening way. And eventually I did boil over, and I freaked out, and I ran across to the opposite side of the porch, and it followed me over to the opposite side of the porch and continued to do a kamikaze circular pattern around me, and I was almost positive it was going to sting me and commit suicide. And suddenly something came over me. I calmed down and I stopped freaking out, and I just stood still and relaxed. And then the bee lost interest in me and flew away. And then it flew back and started going around my head even faster and more viciously, and it sort of freaked me out again. And then I calmed down and didn't do anything. And this time it flew off for good and didn't come back. Maybe a couple weeks later, it might have been less time than that, I was on the porch on another occasion enjoying a cup of coffee, and a bee landed right on my coffee mug, right where the handle was that I was grabbing at to take a sip. And I looked at it and went back to writing for a second and thought, if I just kind of focus on the writing, it'll fly away on its own. It didn't. It sat there for about 10 minutes. And I let it do it. But then something came over me. I stopped writing the short story that I was writing, and I decided to start writing about the bee. And I started appreciating how beautiful it was, the way that it would brush its wings delicately, the little furs and hairs all over its body. And as soon as I started doing that, it flew away. I never saw it again. And I thought how much life could be like that too, in both of those circumstances and both of those stories. What good comes from freaking out over things versus just remaining calm? And as we can see, I went down both paths. I probably still will continue to go down both paths. I'm not always convinced that just because I traverse something once or twice or 5 times means anything. There's always new obstacles. But this was something that I wrote about in a blog a long time ago, and I was reminded of it today, meeting a new person. And I thought about how interesting of a journey it is to be alone. Because I would say that if anything constructive I've ever done in my life, it has been to remain single at times so that I can better understand myself. Because I figure if I understand myself, perhaps that might help me meet the right person. But what the fuck do I know?